Imagine you're sitting by the phone. You've read the message again. Maybe the third time. Maybe the 30th. Don't contact me again. 5 words. From your own child. The child you stayed up with through fevers. The child you drove to soccer practice, to school plays, to college. The child you would have, stepped in front of a moving car for. And now, silence. If that's where you are right now, I want you to take a breath, because I need to say something before we go any further. You are not crazy. You are not a monster. And you are absolutely not alone. Millions of American parents, good parents, loving parents, trying parents, are living with exactly this pain. Right now. Today. I've been a clinical psychologist for over 40 years. I have sat across from parents in their 60s, their 70s, even their 80s, people who built entire lives around their families, and watched them try to understand how it came to this. I'm not here to tell you whose fault it is. I'm not here to take sides. I am here to give you 6 specific, honest, psychologically grounded things you can do, starting today, that will help you survive this. And maybe, over time, give this relationship its best possible chance of healing. But I need you to stay with me. Because the first thing I'm going to tell you is probably the opposite of what every instinct in your body is screaming at you to do right now. Before we get into the steps, let me give you one piece of context that I think will actually make you feel better, not worse. Family estrangement is far more common than most people realize. Research suggests that roughly 1 in 4 American adults is estranged from at least one family member. And in many of those cases, it involves a parent and an adult child. This is not a new problem, but it is one that we, especially those of us over 60, were never taught how to talk about. In our generation, family problems stayed inside the family. You didn't air your grief at the neighborhood barbecue. You didn't call a hotline. You certainly didn't post about it on the internet. And so millions of parents are carrying this alone. Here's the other thing I want you to understand. Estrangement is not a life sentence. It is not a final verdict on who you are as a parent. Relationships, even deeply fractured ones, can and do heal. I have seen it. Many times. But here's the part that nobody tells you. How you behave in the first 90 days after estrangement is declared has an enormous impact on whether healing becomes possible. Which brings me to step 1. When your child says, "Don't contact me again," everything in you wants to fix it. Immediately. You want to call. You want to explain. You want to send one more text. The right text. The one that finally makes them understand. You want to drive to their house. You want to call their sibling, their spouse, their best friend from college. Anyone who might carry a message back. I understand. I genuinely do. But I need you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. Every single one of those impulses, if you act on them, will make things worse. Here's why, and I'll keep this simple. When your child made that declaration, they were telling you something. They were telling you that they need distance in order to feel safe. Whether or not you agree with their reasons, and you may not, that is what they communicated. When you immediately pursue them, calls, texts, showing up, recruiting family members as messengers, you are sending them a clear signal: your boundaries don't matter to me. And every time that signal is sent, it hardens their resolve. It confirms in their mind the very thing that may have driven this decision. There's also something happening in your own brain right now that's working against you. When we're in pain, real gut-level grief, the emotional centers of our brain essentially hijack the rational ones. Psychologists call this an amygdala hijack. You are not thinking clearly. You cannot think clearly. Not yet. So here is my prescription for step 1. The 30-day intentional silence. Not giving up. Not surrendering. Not saying your child was right about everything. 30 days of not initiating contact. 30 days of sitting with the discomfort instead of acting out of panic. Silence, in this moment, is not abandonment. Silence is oxygen. It gives your child room to breathe, and it gives you the space to begin doing the work that actually matters, which is what the next 5 steps are about. I know this is the hardest thing I could ask of you, and I know every day will feel like a year. But trust me, the message you do not send right now may be the most powerful one you ever write. I want to say something important before we go into this step. This is not about blame. I am not going to tell you that everything is your fault. I don't believe that. And more importantly, it's almost never that simple. But if there is any chance of this relationship healing, if there is even a possibility that one day your child's door opens again, it will require you to do something that most people in pain are not willing to do. It will require you to look honestly and clearly in the mirror. I want you to sit quietly, today or tomorrow or this weekend, and ask yourself 3 questions. Question 1. What did my child tell me, more than once, bothered them, that I dismissed? Not what you think they should have been bothered by. What did they say? Did they tell you they felt criticized? Controlled? Like their choices were never good enough? Like they could never quite live up to what you expected? What did you hear and choose in that moment not to fully take seriously? Question 2. Did I love my child the way they needed to be loved, or the way I knew how? This is one of the most important questions in family therapy. There is a difference between intending to love someone and landing love in a way they can receive it. Many of us were raised in homes where love meant sacrifice, provision, discipline, structure. And we gave our children all of those things, genuinely, from the heart. But some children need something different. They need to be seen, to have their inner world acknowledged, to feel that who they are is valued, not just what they do or how they perform. If your love never quite reached them the way you intended it, that doesn't make you a bad parent. But it is worth sitting with. Question 3. What role did my own unhealed wounds play in how I raised my child? This is the deepest question, and it takes real courage to ask it. Most of us carry things from our own childhoods. Wounds we were never given the tools to process. Patterns we absorbed without knowing it. The critical father, the anxious mother, the household where emotions weren't safe. And without meaning to, without intending any harm, we sometimes pass those patterns forward. I am not asking you to condemn yourself for this. I am asking you to see it. Because the moment you can see it, clearly, without flinching, is the moment it loses some of its power. Now, and I say this because I know some of you are thinking it, sometimes adult children estrange their parents for reasons that are unfair. Sometimes the grievances are exaggerated. Sometimes there are outside influences, a partner, a therapist with an agenda, a self-help book misapplied. That may be true in your situation. I don't know. But I will tell you this. Step 2 is not the place to evaluate that. Step 2 is the place to find whatever your part is, however small, and own it fully. Everything else can be addressed later. I've been doing this work for a long time, and one of the most consistently powerful tools I know for processing profound grief is also one of the simplest. Write a letter. Not to send. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Just write. Here's what the neuroscience tells us. When we externalize pain, when we take what's living inside our chests and put it into words on a page, something measurable happens in the brain. The emotional centers quiet down slightly. The rational reflective part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, begins to come back online. We gain, even just a little, the distance between the emotion and the action. So here's what I want you to do. First draft, write everything. Don't censor yourself. Say what you're angry about. Say what you're heartbroken about. Say what you wish had been different. Say what you want them to know, what you're scared of, what you're grieving. Let it be messy. Let it be unfair. Let it be 100% emotionally true. Then, when you're ready, write a second draft. In this one, take out every sentence that assigns blame. Take out every "you always" and "you never." Take out every line that asks them to see your perspective before acknowledging theirs. What you'll find when you do this is that a different letter begins to emerge. And here is how I want you to consider ending it. I love you, not because of what you do or who you become or whether you ever speak to me again. I love you because you are my child, and that doesn't change. I am doing the work of understanding. I am here whenever and if ever you're ready. Not to argue, not to revisit old pain, just here. Put that letter somewhere safe. Do not send it yet, but keep it. Read it when you feel the urge to reach out impulsively. Let it remind you of who you are working to become. I want to speak directly to many of you for a moment, because I know your generation. You were raised to handle things internally, to keep family business private, to be strong, to not burden others, to push through. And there is real honor in that. I'm not dismissing it. But I am telling you, as someone who has spent 40 years studying how human beings heal, that no one processes something this painful entirely on their own. The grief of estrangement is not a cold you can sleep off. It lives in your body. It distorts your thinking. It isolates you. And left completely unaddressed, it can take years off your life, literally. So, please get help. Here are 3 specific options, depending on your situation and what feels accessible. Option 1, individual therapy. Ideally with someone who specializes in family estrangement or adult parent-child relationships. This is not crisis therapy. It is a thinking partnership. Someone whose job is to help you understand what happened, process the grief, and build the kind of insight that makes reconciliation possible. If you're not sure where to start, your primary care physician can often make referrals. Psychology. Today's website has a therapist finder that lets you filter by specialty. Option 2, support groups. There are communities, both online and in person, specifically for parents of estranged adult children. Search for Parents of Estranged Adult Children support groups. These groups can be genuinely life-changing. Not because they give you strategies, but because they give you something perhaps even more important. The experience of being fully understood. You don't have to explain the whole story. Everyone there already knows. Option 3, guided self-work. If therapy isn't accessible right now, financially, logistically, or emotionally, there are solid workbooks and structured journaling programs designed specifically for this kind of grief. These are not substitutes for professional support, but they are real tools. One note of caution. Be careful of the friends, family members, or online communities that respond to your pain by saying, "Your child is terrible. You did nothing wrong. You don't need to change anything." I know that's what part of you wants to hear. And I know it comes from people who love you. But that kind of unconditional validation, without reflection, without growth, is not support. It is a very comfortable trap. Here is something that might surprise you. One of the most pro-relationship things you can do right now has nothing to do with your child. It has everything to do with you. I want you to rebuild your life. I mean that seriously, and I mean it fully. Reconnect with the friendships you let drift. Pursue the interests and passions that got set aside when the kids were young and never quite got picked back up. Volunteer somewhere. Create something. Travel somewhere you've always wanted to go. Build something you're proud of. Take care of your body. Walk. Eat well. Sleep. Now, I want to be honest with you about why I'm saying this, because it might feel like I'm asking you to move on. I'm not. Here's the psychology. One of the most common underlying reasons adult children estrange from parents is that they feel, consciously or not, suffocated, enmeshed. Like they carry the weight of their parents' emotional world. Like their separateness, their right to make their own choices, to live their own lives, was never quite accepted. When you have a full life, when you have genuine purpose, real relationships, things that matter to you beyond your child, 2 things happen. First, you become less desperate. And desperation, as loving as it is at its root, pushes people away. Second, you become more interesting, more real, more like a person they might one day choose to be in relationship with, rather than someone they feel obligated to manage. I've watched this play out more times than I can count. The parents who heal their estrangements are almost never the ones who spent those years waiting by the phone. They are the ones who did something remarkable with the time they were given. Your life is not over because your child is not in it right now. Your life is still yours. And the person you become in this chapter, the depth, the wisdom, the hard-won peace, that person may be exactly who your child needs to meet. At some point, and I want to be clear that this moment is different for everyone, and there is no perfect timeline, you will feel ready to reach out. Not from panic, not from desperation, from a place of centeredness and genuine love. When that moment comes, I want you to do it correctly. Because there is an enormous difference between leaving a door open and standing in the doorway, refusing to let it close. Here is what reaching out the right way looks like. One message. Short. No pressure. No expectation of a response. Something like this. I've been spending a lot of time thinking and doing some real reflection. I love you. Without conditions. Without an agenda. I respect where you are. I'm here whenever and if ever you're ready. You don't need to respond to this. Then, stop. Do not follow up with, I just wanted to make sure you got my message. Do not ask a sibling to check if they read it. Do not send a card 2 weeks later to reinforce it. One message. Then silence. Because silence, in this moment, is the loudest possible signal of respect. Now, I want to talk to you about something I call the long game. Some reconciliations happen in a year. Some take 5 years. Some take 10 or more. I have seen parents reconnect with estranged children at the birth of a grandchild, at a sibling's wedding, during a health crisis that made old grievances feel suddenly smaller. Life creates openings, especially as people age and begin to confront their own mortality. But here is the key. Every day you live with dignity is a day you build the case for reconciliation. Every day you grow, genuinely grow, not perform growth, is a day you become someone your child might, someday, consider approaching. And every day you reach out when they've asked you not to, is a day you make that possibility a little more distant. Here are 3 things to never do. I want to be very direct. Do not issue ultimatums. If you don't respond by Christmas, I'm done trying. Ultimatums tell the other person that your love was conditional all along. Do not recruit others as messengers. Using your other children, mutual friends, or relatives as go-betweens puts them in an impossible position and often backfires badly. Do not go public with your pain. I know social media can feel like a place to find community when you're hurting. But posting about your estrangement, even vaguely, even sympathetically, will almost certainly reach your child. And it will close doors that might otherwise have opened. The long game is quiet. It is patient. It is hard. But it is the only game worth playing. Let me bring this home. Here are the 6 things we covered today. 1. Stop and do not pursue. 2. Look honestly in the mirror. 3. Write the letter you won't send yet. 4. Get professional or community support. 5. Rebuild your own life, fully and genuinely. 6. When the time is right, leave the door open the right way. I want to close with something I mean with everything I have. The fact that you're here, that you watched this entire video, that you're still trying to understand, that you're willing to ask hard questions about yourself in the middle of your own grief. That already tells me something. It tells me you're not the kind of parent who gives up. It tells me you love your child more than you need to be right. That matters. More than you know. Estrangement is not the final chapter of your story as a parent. For many people I have worked with personally, it became the beginning of the most honest, most courageous, most ultimately healing chapter of the whole relationship. I can't promise you that will happen. No one can. But I can tell you, how you walk through this matters. Walk it with honesty. Walk it with grace. Walk it with the kind of love that doesn't need anything back. And whatever happens, you will be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know, I did this right. That is not a small thing. If this video helped you, even a little, please give it a like. It helps more parents find their way here. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 6 steps feels hardest for you right now? This community, the people watching alongside you, they understand in ways most people in your life might not. Subscribe to Strong Elderly Life if you haven't already. Take care of yourself. You deserve that.